The destroyer had been in continuous combat operations for 72 hours and 14 minutes when the 30 contacts appeared on the SPY-6 at 4:07 a.m. 72 hours, 3 separate engagements, 41 one-way attack platforms, 1 ballistic missile probe, and a coordinated fast attack boat operation in a 6-hour window that had ended at 1:30 a.m. and had consumed the last of the RAM inventory. The ship had requested emergency resupply after each engagement. After the first engagement, the resupply had arrived in 48 hours. After the second, in 51. After the third, the logistics vessel was 4 days away, and the ship's current orders required it to remain on station in the Red Sea approach corridor for another 62 hours. The magazine at 4:07 a.m. contained the following: SM-6, 1 of 8 cells loaded. SM-2, 3 of 24 cells loaded. ESSM, 4 of 32 cells loaded. RAM, 0 of 21, empty. CIWS, forward, 34% ammunition, approximately 527 rounds, roughly 7 seconds of sustained fire. CIWS, aft, 41% ammunition, approximately 635 rounds, roughly 8.5 seconds of sustained fire. 5-inch gun, 287 rounds. 1 SM-6, 3 SM-2, 4 ESSM, 0 RAM. 15 seconds of combined CIWS fire. 287 gun rounds. Against 30 shied 136 contacts at 185 kilometers per hour, 66 kilometers out, inbound. The TAO had been awake for 19 hours. The watch team had been cycling through a reduced rotation because 3 crew members were in the medical bay from fragment injuries sustained in the previous engagement, which had ended 2 hours and 37 minutes ago. The ship was not at battle stations. It had stood down from battle stations at 2:15 a.m. to allow the crew to rest and the damage control teams to complete assessments on the fragment impacts to the forward hull plating. The general alarm at 4:07 a.m. brought a crew that was, in the clinical professional sense, exhausted, not impaired, not incapable, exhausted. The difference in operational quality between a rested crew and an exhausted one was measurable in seconds per decision and degrees of accuracy in each assessment. After 72 hours, those seconds and degrees had accumulated into a performance degradation that no individual felt acutely, but which every performance metric would document in the after-action record. The TAO looked at 30 contacts and looked at the inventory and felt something he had not experienced in prior engagements in this deployment. Not fear. The professional version of the thing that felt like fear from the outside. A calculation-based recognition that the numbers ahead of him did not work. 8 SM-6 should handle a salvo of 30 in standard conditions. I have 1. 3 SM-2 should handle maybe 2 contacts at the outer ring. 4 ESSM should handle maybe 3 contacts at the middle ring. After that, I have 15 seconds of CIWS and 287 gun rounds. He said it aloud because the CIC watch team deserved to know the math before the engagement started. There was no response for about 3 seconds. Then the weapons officer said, "What's the plan?" The TAO had been computing it while he spoke. The math did not work with standard engagement doctrine. Standard engagement doctrine allocated weapons to rings. Outer ring handled the most contacts at the most efficient cost per intercept. Middle ring caught the survivors. Inner ring provided terminal defense. The allocation assumed a full magazine. He did not have a full magazine. He had scraps of a magazine. We don't use the outer ring as a ring. We use every interceptor as a precision investment. 1 SM-6, 1 SM-2 at a time, and we pick the targets that matter most, not the targets that are easiest. The gun works the surface and the low-altitude contacts at 10 to 15 kilometers. CIWS saves itself for the contacts that survive everything else. We need to reduce 30 contacts to a number that 15 seconds of CIWS can handle, which means getting to 6 or fewer contacts reaching the inner ring, probably 4 or fewer. Getting from 30 to 4 through 1 SM6, 3 SM2, 4 ESSM, and 287 gun rounds was a target reduction of 26 contacts from systems that had, at standard hit rates, a theoretical capacity to neutralize approximately 11. Not 4, not 6, 11. And standard hit rates assumed well-rested crews, clean track files, and a fire control system that had not been running continuously for 72 hours with intermittent emergency reboot cycles between engagements. The gap between 11 and 26 was what the CIWS would have to close. 15 seconds of CIWS against 19 contacts arriving across multiple bearings was not a survivable calculation. The CIWS could handle 6 to 8 contacts in 15 seconds of sequential engagement. Against 19, the mounts would be empty before the last contacts reached the hull. The TAO authorized weapons free at 4:08 a.m. and prepared to use every asset available with a precision and selectivity that the ship had never needed before, because it had always had enough to be somewhat selective. Now it had almost nothing and had to make every single round count in a way that a full magazine never demanded. Running count: 4:08 a.m., second 60, 30 UAV contacts, range 63 kilometers, 185 kilometers per hour, altitude 380 to 420 meters. Magazine status: SM 6x1, SM 2x3, ESSM x4, RAM X0, CIWS 4, 34%, approximately 7 seconds. CIWS aft, 41%, approximately 8.5 seconds. Gun, 287 rounds. Crew, exhausted, 72 plus hours, continuous ops. Time to SM6 range, 9 minutes. Cost, $0. The single SM6 was the most consequential weapons decision in the engagement. 1 round. 4,200 rounds per minute of fire control calculation behind it. Against 30 contacts at ranges where the SM6 could engage any of them, the question was not which contact to engage. It was what the SM6 was worth, strategically, not just tactically. A standard SM6 hit against the Shahed 136 contact eliminated 1 platform. The SM6's value was not in the single platform it eliminated, but in the engagement geometry it created. The SM6, launched at the lead contact of the most direct approach group, would force the remaining contacts in that group to absorb the next engagement system's attention in a compressed timeline, because the lead contact, having been eliminated, meant the second contact was now the closest and most time-critical. The SM6 was a pacing round. The pacing established by the first round dictated how the remaining scarce inventory was allocated. He chose the contact with the highest angular approach rate, the most direct intercept point, whose removal would create the most space for SM2 and ESSM to manage the survivors without overlapping timelines. SM6 Cell 1 launched at 4:13 a.m. 1 interceptor. The fire control system tracked it northwest toward a contact at 58 kilometers on bearing 051. Flight time, 82 seconds. Running count, 4:13 a.m., second 361, SM 6x1 in flight. 30 contacts at 54 to 60 kilometers. SM6 remaining, 0. SM2, 3. ESSM, 4. RAM, 0. CIWS 4, 34%. CIWS aft, 41%. Gun, 287. Target selection, highest angular approach rate contact. Cost, $2.1 million. Intercept confirmed at 4:14 a.m. 1 contact neutralized, 29 remaining. SM6 inventory, 0. The outer ring was gone. Not depleted, gone. 1 round had been the outer ring. The TAO had prepared the SM2 allocation before the SM6 result came back. He was not allocating in sequence. He was computing all 3 remaining layers simultaneously. Because with this inventory, he could not afford the luxury of waiting to see the result of one layer before allocating the next. 3 SM2 cells, 3 contacts. The weapons officer had selected the 3 contacts whose approach vectors created the greatest threat to the ship's defensive capacity at the middle ring. Not the closest contacts, but the contacts whose bearing angles would require the CIWS to rotate furthest between sequential engagements if they reached the inner ring. The goal was not maximum intercepts. The goal was to shape the surviving threat geometry to minimize what the CIWS would face. Running count, 4:14 a.m., second 422, SM6-0, 1 intercept confirmed. 29 contacts at 50 to 56 kilometers. SM2, 3 remaining. ESSM, 4. RAM, 0. CIWS 4, 34%. CIWS aft, 41%. Gun, 287. Geometry allocation in progress. Cost, $2.1 million. Time, 7 minutes. SM2 cells, 1, 2, and 3 launched in a 2.8-second sequence against 3 contacts at 34, 37, and 41 kilometers. 2 intercepts, 1 miss. The 3rd contact executed a descent from 380 to 95 meters in the SM2 terminal phase. The SM2 proximity fuse detonated 21 meters from the contact rather than within lethal radius. The contact continued at 28 kilometers. 27 contacts remaining. SM2 inventory 0. ESSM cells 1 through 4. 4 rounds. Against 4 contacts at 18 to 24 kilometers. The 4 contacts whose approach vectors the fire control system rated as highest confidence intercept geometry for the semi-active radar seeker. Not the most dangerous contacts. The most reliably interceptable contacts. With 4 ESSM and 27 contacts, the TAO was not trying to reduce the count significantly. He was trying to reduce it specifically, to remove the 4 contacts whose bearing angles would create the worst CIWS sequencing problem in the terminal phase. The weapons officer had the same 4 contacts already flagged. If they survived to CIWS range, the forward mount needed to rotate 67 degrees between engagements, 5 seconds of pure rotation from a 7-second ammunition reserve. Remove those 4 contacts and the rotation dropped to 22 degrees, 3 seconds saved. 3 more contacts the forward mount could engage. ESSM cells 1 through 4 fired in 1.9-second sequence against the 4 selected contacts at 19 to 23 kilometers. 3 intercepts. 1 miss. Contact 3, a contact that had been descending steadily since detection, was now at 65 meters altitude when the ESSM engaged it. The basket offset from the altitude change moved the ESSM outside lethal radius by 9 meters. Contact 3 survived. 24 contacts remaining. The geometry the weapons officer had been trying to create was now compromised by 1 contact. The 67-degree problem was now a 45-degree problem instead of a 22-degree problem. Still reduced from the unmodified version. Still better than if the ESSM had not been used at all. Running count, 4:17 a.m., second 617, SM6 0, SM2 0, ESSM 0, RAM 0. 24 contacts, range 9 to 17 kilometers. Gun, 287. CIWS 4, 34%, approximately 7 seconds. CIWS aft, 41%, approximately 8.5 seconds. Surviving contact geometry, 45-degree rotation problem on forward mount. Cost, $10.5 million. Time, 10 minutes. Running count, 4:17 a.m. second 601, SM60, SM20, ESSM 0, RAM 0. 24 contacts, range 9 to 17 kilometers. CIWS 4, 34%, approximately 7 seconds. CIWS aft, 41%, approximately 8.5 seconds. Gun, 287. Seahawk launching. ESSM miss. Geometry problem reduced from 45 degrees to 22 degrees. One miss shifted back to 45 degrees. Cost, $10.5 million. Time, 10 minutes. 24 contacts. No missiles. The gun and the CIWS. The 5-inch gun opened at 4:17 a.m. Rate weapon, 20 rounds per minute, attriting the count before contacts reached the 2-kilometer CIWS zone. The Seahawk launched at 4:16 a.m. to serve as targeting relay. Without FLIR-based position data, the gun was firing on SPY-6 tracks alone, affected by the same C-clutter ambiguity problem that degraded low-altitude contact tracking. First contact at 14.2 kilometers. 6 rounds, Seahawk guided. Contact disabled. Next 3 contacts over 3 minutes. 6, 7, and 8 rounds each. Round count rising as angular motion. Rate increased at closer range. 4 contacts disabled in 25 rounds, 20 remaining. At 4:21 a.m., the Seahawk called a contact it had not previously reported. Contact on bearing 078, range 8.1 kilometers, altitude 22 meters, sea skimming, below the SPY-6's reliable detection band in the coastal clutter return from the distant coastline. The gun shifted to the new contact. 3 proximity rounds. Second round, impact assessed. Contact disabled. 19 contacts at ranges between 6.8 and 11 kilometers. The gun continued cycling. Running count. 4:22 a.m. Second 916. Gun 102 rounds expended, 185 remaining. 5 contacts disabled by gun. 19 contacts at 6 to 11 kilometers. CIWS 4, 34%. CIWS aft, 41%. No missiles. Seahawk, targeting relay, 2 contacts hidden in clutter identified. Time to CIWS range. Approximately 8 minutes on closest contacts. Cost, $10.7 million. Time, 15 minutes. The gun continued working at 20 rounds per minute. 4 more contacts disabled over the next 6 minutes. The rate of fire was not declining, but the difficulty was increasing as contacts closed to 4 to 6 kilometers, and the angular motion rates required more frequent re-aiming cycles between rounds. 46 rounds per 4 contacts, 11 rounds per contact average at close range versus 6 at medium range. 15 contacts remaining as the closest contacts crossed 3 kilometers. 185 rounds entering the gun engagement. 139 rounds remaining after the close range phase. The gun had consumed 148 rounds in 14 minutes of engagement to disable 9 contacts. The CIWS range, 2 kilometers. 15 contacts entering the CIWS engagement zone. The TAO already knew what 15 contacts meant against 15.5 seconds of combined CIWS ammunition. The math was simple and had been in his awareness since the engagement opened. 15 contacts at average 1 second engagement per contact was 15 seconds. The combined CIWS inventory was 15.5 seconds. Half a second of margin across 15 contacts. But the contacts were not arriving sequentially in ideal geometry. They were arriving across a bearing arc from 038 to 072, a 34-degree spread, and the CIWS mounts would need to rotate between contacts. Every degree of rotation required 25 milliseconds. The 45-degree rotation problem the weapons officer had been trying to solve with the ESSM allocation was now the surviving problem with 15 contacts. The forward mount's rotation time between contacts would reduce its effective engagement capacity from the theoretical 7 seconds to approximately 5 to 5.5 seconds. Enough for 5 to 6 contacts, not the 7 or 8 seconds of uninterrupted fire represented by the full inventory. The gun kept firing as the contacts entered the 2-kilometer zone. 3 more disabled at 2.8, 2.4, and 2.2 kilometers. The gun rounds at this range were being fired nearly horizontally, the proximity fuse detonating in the same horizontal plane as the contacts, the fragmentation pattern centered on the target bearing. 12 contacts remaining. CIWS forward acquired the first contact at 1,900 meters, bearing 043, altitude 380 meters. Clean track. Burst 0.8 seconds, 60 rounds. Contact fragmented. Warhead initiated at 1,700 meters. The pressure wave arrived at the hull with the characteristic quality of a near engagement. Sharp, focused, a sound the crew had heard in previous engagements and which their exhausted systems registered with less of the adrenaline response that would have accompanied it on day 1, day 3 of combat. The sharp crack was becoming familiar. It was not supposed to become familiar. Rotation to the next contact. Burst, 0.6 seconds, 45 rounds. Second contact fragmented at 1,500 meters. Warhead initiated. Third contact. CIWS forward had to rotate 24 degrees to acquire the contact on bearing 067 near the edge of the forward mount's optimal arc. Rotation time, 0.6 seconds. Burst, 0.7 seconds. Contact fragmented. Warhead initiated at 2,100 meters from the forced off-axis engagement geometry. CIWS forward. 3 contacts engaged, 42% ammunition consumed from the 34% starting point, remaining approximately 19%, roughly 2.5 seconds of fire. CIWS aft engaged the contacts on the southern arc. 3 bursts, 0.7 seconds, 0.5 seconds, 0.8 seconds. 3 contacts fragmented, all warheads initiated. 3 more detonations in the 1,400 to 2,600 meter band. The accumulation of overpressure events from 6 simultaneous or near simultaneous detonations in the close approach arc produced a combined pressure signature that registered across the ship simultaneously. Not a single sharp blow, but an overlapping series of compressions that the crew felt as a sustained physical event lasting approximately 3 seconds. Running count, 4:28 a.m., second 1,261, CIWS, 6 contacts engaged. 6 contacts remaining at 800 to 1,800 meters. CIWS 4, 19%, approximately 2.5 seconds. CIWS aft, 23%, approximately 3 seconds. Gun, 139 rounds remaining. SM6, 0. SM2, 0. ESSM, 0. RAM, 0. Cost, $11.0 million. Time, 21 minutes, 6 contacts. 5.5 seconds of combined CIWS remaining. The gun was still firing. 2 more contacts disabled at 1,600 and 1,400 meters by proximity rounds, 4 rounds each, the gun delivering faster and more accurately at this range than it had at 12 kilometers. The short flight time eliminating most of the angular motion error. 4 contacts remaining. 4 contacts. 5.5 seconds of CIWS. CIWS forward. 2 contacts on bearing 044 and 052, range 1,100 and 1,300 meters. Sequential. First burst, 0.7 seconds, 52 rounds. Contact at 1,100 meters, fragmented at 950 meters. Warhead initiated. Overpressure at 950 meters. The sharpest single event of the engagement. a concussive impact that moved loose equipment in CIC and which the crew felt as a pressure change rather than a sound. Second burst. The rotation from 044 to 052 consumed 0.2 seconds. Burst. 0.9 seconds, 67 rounds. Contact at 1,300 meters, fragmented at 1,100 meters. Warhead initiated. CIWS forward, 4% ammunition remaining. Approximately 0.5 seconds. It was effectively empty. CIWS aft. 2 contacts on bearing 058 and 064, range 900 and 1,200 meters. Sequential. First burst at 900 meters. The contact was at sea skimming altitude 18 meters. The tracking radar in near maximum sea clutter. Discrimination mode at this range. Burst 1.2 seconds, 90 rounds. The contact fragmented at 780 meters. The warhead initiated at 780 meters from the hull. At 780 meters, the pressure wave was the most intense of the engagement. Not 950 meters, not 1,500 meters, but 780 meters. The hull registered it as a sharp, heavy blow. 12 crew members in forward spaces reported being thrown against equipment or bulkheads by the hull motion. 4 sustained minor injuries. All returned to their stations. 1 contact remaining. Bearing 061, range 1,050 meters. CIWS aft had 30% ammunition remaining, approximately 4 seconds of fire. The contact was directly in the aft mount's optimal engagement cone. Burst. 1.0 seconds, 75 rounds. Contact fragmented at 900 meters. Warhead initiated. The pressure wave at 900 meters. A 4th impact, slightly less intense than the 780-meter event, arriving 1.3 seconds after it. At 4:29 a.m., both CIWS mounts were in standby mode, and the SPY-6 showed no contacts within 3 kilometers. The gun had stopped firing at 4:28 a.m. when the last gun range contacts were inside the CIWS zone. The Seahawk crew called the all-clear at 4:30 a.m. after a full sweep of the approach corridor. All 30 contacts were neutralized. The engagement was over. Running count. 4:29 a.m., second 1,342. All 30 contacts neutralized. SM6 0, SM2 0, ESSM 0, RAM 0. CIWS forward 4%, approximately 0.5 seconds. CIWS aft 7%, approximately 1 second. Gun 62 rounds remaining. 4 warhead detonations at 780 to 1,100 meters. 4 crew minor injuries. Cost $11.4 million. Time elapsed 22 minutes. The ship had survived, with 1.5 seconds of combined CIWS fire remaining. 1.5 seconds. That was the margin. Not the margin between this engagement and the previous engagements that had built to this point. The margin at the exact moment the last contact was neutralized. If the engagement had included 1 more contact, 31 instead of 30, the CIWS would have been empty before it arrived. That 31st contact would have reached the hull. The adversary had sent 30 contacts. The threshold for hull impact with this specific magazine state, 31. The damage assessment at 6 a.m. Forward hull, 3 fragment impacts from the 950-meter and 1,100-meter detonations, all above the waterline. 1 impact had penetrated through a hull inspection plate into the void space beneath the forward berthing deck. The space was non-structural and not watertight to a deck below, so no flooding risk, but a significant physical hole above the waterline, requiring temporary repair before the ship could be considered fully hull integrity sound in heavy sea states. The damage control team had it plugged within 20 minutes using emergency repair materials. Aft deck, 7 fragment impacts from the 780-meter and 900-meter detonations, the closest detonations producing the widest fragment dispersal at the ship's level. 2 small propellant fires had been initiated by fragments entering exhaust spaces, both extinguished within 90 seconds by automated suppression systems. Personnel: 4 crew members with minor injuries from the 780-meter detonation hull movement, all treated and returned to duty within 3 hours. The magazine assessment at 6:15 a.m. was, at this point, almost purely a formality. The watch team knew the numbers. They had been watching the inventory decline across 3 prior engagements. Reading them aloud was the formal act of acknowledging where the 72-hour deployment had arrived. SM-6, 0 of 8, SM-2, 0 of 24, ESSM, 0 of 32, RAM, 0 of 21. CIWS forward, 4%, approximately 0.5 seconds of fire. CIWS aft, 7%, approximately 1 second of fire. 5-inch gun, 62 rounds of the original 600. The ship had 11% of its original gun ammunition. It had 1.5 seconds of CIWS ammunition. It had 0 missiles of any category. If a contact appeared in the next 4 days before resupply, the ship's defense was 62 rounds of 5-inch ammunition and 1 to 2 ineffective bursts from mounts that were effectively empty. The TAO filed the emergency resupply request at 6:30 a.m. with a priority designation he had not used in 6 months of deployment. Critical, 0 defensive capacity. The logistics system had 4 designations. He had used urgent for the first 2 resupply requests and high for the third. The 4th request used the only remaining option, ETA from the nearest logistics vessel, 4 days. The supply officer assembled the final accounting at 8 a.m. 30, shod 136 platforms at $20,000, $600,000, launch logistics, $60,000. Total adversary cost this engagement, $660,000. U.S. munitions this engagement: 1 SM-6, $2.1 million, 3 SM-2, $3.6 million, 4 ESSM, $1.8 million, 225 gun rounds, $405,000, CIWS, $21,000, total $7.35 million. Exchange ratio, 11 to 1. But the correct metric was the full 72-hour period. 3 prior engagements had cost approximately $145 million. This engagement, $7.35 million. Combined across 4 engagements, $152 million. Adversary total, across all 4, estimated $3.4 million. Exchange ratio, across 72 hours, 45 to 1. The adversary had achieved something in this engagement that they had not achieved in any prior engagement. They had rendered the ship completely defenseless, not temporarily degraded, not operating at reduced capacity, completely without missile inventory, with CIWS at effective 0, with gun ammunition at 10%. The next contact to appear would face a warship that was, from the perspective of any threat arriving at greater than 2 kilometers, operationally identical to an unarmed vessel. For 72 hours, the adversary had applied continuous engagement pressure against a single ship, not with overwhelming force in any individual engagement, with persistence. 3 engagements designed to be individually manageable, each one costing the defense more than the adversary spent on it, each one leaving the magazine slightly more depleted than it would need to be for the next engagement to exceed capacity. The design was resource attrition across time. 3 individually manageable engagements, each costing the defense more than the adversary spent. Then a 4th engagement calibrated to the estimated remaining inventory, not the original magazine, but what 3 prior engagements had left behind. For $660,000, the adversary conducted the final deduction in a 72-hour account that left the most capable surface combatant in the world with 1.5 seconds of ammunition and 4 days until resupply. The ocean did not grade on achievement. It graded on what remained.